On January 8, 2023, Brazil witnessed a dark chapter in its democratic history. The day began like any other, with the sun rising over the iconic skyline of Brasilia, but it quickly descended into chaos and turmoil. A wave of protests, fueled by allegations of electoral fraud, swept through the capital, Brasilia, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The streets, usually bustling with daily life, were now scenes of intense clashes between protesters and police, with smoke and debris filling the air. In the aftermath of this tumultuous day, the Supreme Federal Court, Brazil's highest court, launched a series of investigations into the events of January 8th. The courtrooms, usually places of quiet deliberation, were now the epicenters of a national crisis, with judges poring over legal documents and gaveling in urgent sessions. These investigations, while crucial for upholding the rule of law, have become entangled with accusations of political persecution, particularly targeting Senator Marcos Do Val. The senator, a prominent figure in Brazilian politics, found himself at the heart of a legal and political maelstrom. The STF's inquiry quickly expanded to encompass individuals suspected of inciting or financing the unrest. Police operations were conducted across the country, with numerous individuals being detained and financial records scrutinized for any signs of illicit activity. Among those targeted was Senator Do Val, a vocal critic of the current administration. His outspoken nature and frequent media appearances made him a high-profile figure in the unfolding drama. Do Val has vehemently denied any involvement in the January 8th events, maintaining that his criticisms of the government are protected under the banner of free speech. He has consistently argued that his right to speak out against the administration is a fundamental democratic principle. However, the senator's pronouncements have done little to quell the legal storm brewing around him. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, with every legal maneuver and statement scrutinized by the public and media alike. As the investigation unfolded, a palpable sense of unease settled over the nation. Citizens watched anxiously as news reports detailed the latest developments, with the Brazilian flag often seen at half-mast, symbolizing the nation's collective anxiety. The events of January 8th exposed deep divisions within Brazilian society, and the STF's response seemed to exacerbate these rifts. The streets of Brasilia became a battleground for opposing political rallies, each side fervently defending their stance. Critics of the investigations, including some legal scholars and opposition politicians, argued that the court was overstepping its bounds, jeopardizing fundamental democratic principles in its pursuit of justice. They warned that such actions could set a dangerous precedent for the future. The situation surrounding Senator Do Val, in particular, became a lightning rod for controversy. His case was not just a legal battle, but a symbol of the broader conflict between different visions of Brazil's future. His case, they argued, exemplified a broader pattern of judicial overreach, where the STF was wielding its authority to silence dissent and punish those critical of its actions. The media was rife with opinion pieces and debates on the implications of the court's actions. As the legal battle raged on, the specter of political persecution loomed large, casting a long shadow over Brazilian democracy. The nation's future seemed uncertain, with the very foundations of its democratic institutions being tested.
I am a staunch right-wing politician and a fervent supporter of former President Jair Bolsonaro. My political journey has been deeply intertwined with the ideals and policies that Bolsonaro championed during his tenure. From economic reforms to stringent law enforcement measures, I have always stood by his side, advocating for a Brazil that is strong, sovereign, and free from the clutches of corruption. I find myself at the heart of this controversy, a maelstrom of political and judicial battles that threaten to engulf my career and tarnish my reputation. The stakes have never been higher, and the lines between justice and persecution have become increasingly blurred. I have long accused the STF of undermining Brazilian democracy and eroding individual liberties. Their actions, in my view, have overstepped the boundaries of judicial authority, encroaching upon the legislative and executive branches of government. This overreach has not only stifled political discourse, but has also instilled a sense of fear among those who dare to speak out. In the aftermath of the January 8th riots, I became a prime target for investigators who suspect me of inciting violence through my rhetoric. These accusations are not just an attack on me, but on the very principles of free speech and political expression. The events of that day have been used as a pretext to clamp down on dissenting voices, casting a wide net of suspicion and blame. But I vehemently deny these allegations. My words have always been aimed at inspiring change and advocating for the rights of the Brazilian people. The charges against me are baseless, a fabrication designed to discredit my efforts and silence my voice. I am a victim of political persecution orchestrated by the STF and its allies within the government. This is not just about me. It is about the broader struggle for justice and democracy in Brazil. The tactics used against me are reminiscent of darker times in our history, where political opponents were silenced through intimidation and legal manipulation. My criticisms of the court, however sharp, are protected under Parliamentary Immunity, a constitutional provision designed to safeguard the freedom of speech and expression for elected officials. This immunity is not a shield for wrongdoing, but a necessary protection to ensure that representatives can speak freely on behalf of their constituents, without fear of retribution. My prosecution is an attempt to silence dissent and stifle opposition voices, a dangerous precedent that threatens to dismantle the very foundations of Brazilian democracy. If this can happen to a sitting senator, it can happen to any citizen who dares to challenge the status quo. This is a fight not just for my freedom, but for the future of our nation.
The senator's claims resonated with a significant portion of the population, particularly those who shared his distrust of the STF and its expanding powers. His narrative of resistance and defiance struck a chord with many Brazilians who felt marginalized and voiceless in the current political climate. They viewed Do Val's case as a blatant example of the judiciary overstepping its boundaries, using its authority to target political opponents and silence dissenting views. This perception was further fueled by a series of high-profile cases where the STF appeared to act with impunity, raising concerns about the balance of power within the government. Social media platforms became battlegrounds for this ideological clash, with Do Val's supporters rallying behind the hashtag Marcos Do Val Inocente, decrying what they perceived as a politically motivated witch hunt. The digital sphere buzzed with debates, memes, and viral posts, each side fervently defending their stance and attempting to sway public opinion. As the legal proceedings against Do Val gained momentum, a sense of anxiety and apprehension gripped the nation. The media coverage was relentless, with every development scrutinized and debated. The public watched with bated breath, aware that the outcome of this case could have far-reaching implications for the future of political discourse in Brazil. The senator's plight became a symbol of the growing polarization within Brazilian society, a stark reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions in a nation still grappling with its authoritarian past. The echoes of history loomed large, with many fearing a return to the days when dissent was met with brutal suppression. The question on everyone's mind was whether justice would prevail, or whether Do Val would become another casualty in a dangerous game of political maneuvering. The outcome of this case would not only determine the fate of one man, but could also set a precedent for how dissent and opposition are treated in Brazil's evolving democracy.
Central to Do Val's defense is the principle of parliamentary immunity, a cornerstone of many democratic systems designed to safeguard the freedom of speech and expression for elected officials. This principle is not just a legal technicality. It is a fundamental aspect of democratic governance that ensures legislators can perform their duties without fear of retribution or legal consequences. By protecting the voices of elected representatives, parliamentary immunity aims to foster a robust and open legislative process. This immunity, enshrined in Article 53 of the Brazilian Constitution, shields members of Congress from prosecution for opinions, words, and votes cast in the exercise of their legislative duties. It is a safeguard meant to protect the legislative branch from undue influence and interference, ensuring that lawmakers can debate and legislate freely. Do Val argues that this constitutional provision protects him from prosecution, as his criticisms of the STF fall squarely within the bounds of his parliamentary mandate. He contends that his statements were made in the context of his role as a senator, and thus should be protected under the umbrella of parliamentary immunity.
However, the STF counters that parliamentary immunity is not absolute. They argue that while the principle is crucial for democratic function, it has its limits and cannot be used as a blanket protection for all actions taken by legislators, and does not extend to inciting violence or participating in criminal activities. The court maintains that actions which threaten public order and safety, or which undermine the rule of law, fall outside the protective scope of parliamentary immunity. The court argues that Do Val's actions went beyond mere criticism, alleging that his inflammatory rhetoric had incited the January 8th riots. These riots resulted in significant damage to government property and posed a serious threat to public safety and democratic stability. They point to his social media posts and public pronouncements, which they claim contained veiled threats against the court and its members. These posts and statements, according to the STF, were not just expressions of opinion, but calls to action that contributed to the unrest. The legal battle over the interpretation and application of parliamentary immunity in Do Val's case became a focal point of the national debate. It raised critical questions about the balance between protecting free speech and maintaining public order, and about the limits of legislative privilege. Legal experts weighed in, offering divergent interpretations of the constitutional provision and its limitations. Some viewed the case as a test of the resilience of Brazil's democratic institutions, while others saw it as a necessary check on potential abuses of power by elected officials. Some argued that the STF's narrow interpretation of parliamentary immunity set a dangerous precedent, potentially chilling free speech within the legislature and eroding the separation of powers. They warned that such a precedent could deter legislators from speaking out on controversial issues, thereby weakening the democratic process. Others contended that the STF was justified in its actions, emphasizing that parliamentary immunity should not be a shield for inciting violence or undermining democratic institutions. They argued that holding lawmakers accountable for actions that threaten democracy is essential for maintaining the rule of law. They argued that upholding the rule of law and holding individuals accountable for their actions, regardless of their political affiliations, was paramount in a democracy. This perspective underscores the importance of ensuring that no one is above the law, and that democratic principles are upheld even in the face of political controversy.
The international community has been closely monitoring the situation, with many experts expressing concern over the potential impact on Brazil's diplomatic relations. The investigations and subsequent legal battles have raised questions about the stability of Brazil's democratic institutions, which could affect its standing on the global stage. International relations experts suggest that the outcome of this case could influence Brazil's foreign policy and its relationships with other democratic nations. The perception of Brazil's commitment to upholding democratic principles and the rule of law is crucial for maintaining strong international alliances. As the legal battle raged on, the very foundations of Brazilian democracy seemed to hang in the balance. The outcome of this case could have far-reaching implications for the future of parliamentary immunity, the rule of law, and the stability of democratic institutions in Brazil.